would say. Definitely one of the most expressive players to watch is definitely the big one there. But, you know, this could just be fives across the board. If this was a reality rating of Justsaiyan.
So let's take a look at the lineups they've got, because both players actually came to different conclusions, I would say, in terms of lineups. It's not so much, oh, well, they played together a lot, talk a lot, so they're going to bring the same stuff.
Going to go down is I think Aku might just struggle to get a win with his Shudderwalk Shaman against Saiyan's lineup. But apart from that, the rest of the matchups are fairly back and forth between the two.
Yeah, we'll see how it plays out with both players taking the alternate versions of a lot of these decks. Zoo Warlock we see from Akumaker as we get into game number 1 versus the Quest Rogue. And then there's, you know, obviously Saiyan's bringing the Even Warlock, Mali Druid versus Token Druid, you know, always taking just the opposite versions of the decks. But let's kick this one off. It's going to be the Quest Rogue versus the Zoolock, sorry. This is a pretty tough matchup for the Quest Rogue, I would say.
It is. It's one of the matchups where, you know, a couple of weeks ago, a bit longer than that, a couple of months ago even, Fan of Knives kind of became core in Quest Rogue. And that really did help against the type of aggro decks that were hanging around at the time. You know, Token Druids, for example, and the Odd Paladins. Zoo is probably the best aggro deck at just being resistant to Fan of Knives. It doesn't really care. You know, unless you have like Fan Prep Fan or something ridiculous, or you're Mimic Podding a Fan and then getting a Prep to pair with one of those, you know, some kind of nonsense. They don't really care about that small damage splash removal. If you're going to win the matchup, it's more things like Glacial Shards, South Sea Deckhands for early removal, and even Lab Recruiters to contest as a 3-2 in the early game can be huge in this matchup.
Yeah, and we see even the minions themselves are resistant to things like Fan of Knives.
Yeah.
But then when you add the fact that this deck runs heals for some reason, you know what I mean? Like, makes it even worse, because if you even try and set up something over multiple turns, the heals can come out and make those clears impossible. But Saiyan does have the first Glacial Shard down, just blocking out the attack on that Flame Imp. But look at the rest of his hand. A Vanish, Glacial Shard, and a Stone Tusk Boar means that he's going to have to draw something pretty quickly that actually gets this deck rolling and isn't just defensive, because Zoo also isn't really a deck that cares that much about Vanish either, because they can normally just throw at least 3 to 4 of those minions back on the board.
Yeah, we do just want to clarify, by the way, I believe the matchup graphic was wrong, and actually Saiyan's Warlock has been banned, whereas Akumaker has had his Quest Rogue banned.
Okay.
The actual ban we have in the series.
You promise? Before I cross this off?
I will pass the buck entirely to the production that I just received in my ear. But yes, I've had it reconfirmed. That is accurate.
Okay, cool. Just before I made a note, that's all, you know, I don't want to make a note after, then cross out and make another note on top of. But Sonya?
Sonya's all massive, of course. Barely needs saying, really, at this point. Sonya Shadow Dancer, really one of the cards that makes Quest Rogue tick right now, along with Giggling Inventor being that kind of security blanket that it needs against the aggro decks. Those are probably the 2 cards that are making the deck as dominant as it is right now.
Yeah, we see Saiyan, all he's trying to do is buy time. The Soulfire was used last turn from Akumaker, and now he's just throwing Glacial Shard away. You know, basically, he isn't planning on getting the quest done with that. He just wants to say, just don't kill me, just give me a few turns and let me set something up. Let me get a couple of extra cards, maybe get that Mimic Pod or the Minstrel, for example, to just really get, you know, hand size that this Quest Rogue can really play with and make some impactful decisions with. Because at the moment, Saiyan's just holding on, and this looks like a miserable turn.
It does. And this is miserable because of, you can extend this like 2 turns into the future, right? Because Saiyan can't challenge the board in any meaningful way this turn. That means Akumaker has a completely free turn on the following turn to get 4 or 5 attacks onto the board on the Zoo side. And then from there, Saiyan's long-term game plan is likely to be try and land Giggling Inventor, have the 2-1 stick, and then have Sonya following up behind that. So now this turn, because he's not able to develop the board state, Aku has too much freedom to develop ahead of him, and it dramatically lowers the chances that he can get the 2-1 main body of the Giggling to stick on the next turn.
Yeah, and even worse, if you try and piece together an alternate route with, say, Vanish, you don't gain the time, you actually just create the same game but a turn later, because after the Vanish, Akumaker just does the same, and then the damage is just added up. It's already got to 30 at that point.
The great news here, though, is that Aku had a very weak turn due to the early draw of the Solarium, which is not a strong early game card, and the fact that he had an awkward hand with Fungal Mancer, Fungal Enchanter. Just tap Voidwalker on that turn means that there now are only 4 attacks available on board.
Yeah, and I know hindsight is a wonderful thing, but if you want to go for a stronger setup, was there ever a reason to Solarium that turn and say, and you have multiple options to try and get some more onto the board than avoid?
I don't think so. I think you can, if they don't have the Giggling Inventor, then you know you've kind of played Solarium at a very weird point. If they do have the Giggling Inventor and you don't top deck Doomguard as you have here, which solves the problem for you, you can then Solarium that turn, looking for Soulfire, looking for other options that will help you deal with the 2-1. Because again, in case this point wasn't clear to anyone watching, do not leave the 2-1 alive in this matchup. Because they will Sonya it, they will bounce it, they will Shadow Step it, they'll find some way to punish you for it. So everything I've been talking about for the last 2 or 3 turns, about that exchange between numbers of attacks from Akumaker, that's what that's all about. Just making sure that 2-1 does not live so that you can get punished enormously for it as the Zoo player.
Now Saiyan has... It's just hard. This game has just been hard choice after hard choice for Saiyan right now, because yeah, Giggling Inventor can be played and he soaks a lot of damage. But then what? You're dead still the turn after. Like I said, it's all about delay tactics, and Saiyan did go for the Vanish, and one small benefit lessens the power of the hand size that Zoo can normally drop back down again after Vanish, because if they replay it, then it's a card that will discard some of the hand anyway.
Yeah.
The big negative is there was 2 chain gangs in the hand. So...
Well, I was going to say, almost every minion in Zoo has an upside and a downside, which, by the way, deckhand here, massive draw, immediately enables the Sonya turn. But just to finish that point, almost every minion has an upside and a downside in Zoo when you vanish it. Because, yes, chain gangs duplicate themselves, they also cost 4 mana. It's very expensive to play. As with all the 3-mana 3/3s in the deck, right? They're very expensive to play in terms of how much pressure they generate, but each of them has a caveat to that. Happy Ghoul might end up costing 0 again. Fungal Enchanter might perfectly heal your board to play around AoE removal.
Right.
So that sometimes they're great minions to vanish, sometimes they're terrible. It's just very, very situational.
So the deckhand, as you briefly mentioned, kind of saving the day, potentially, for Saiyan right now. He still has that second Giggling Inventor, which will be able to buy him some level of time as and when desired. But most importantly for Saiyan is just a continuation of not dying. Because normally a lot of the time...
Big fan.
Versus Zoo. This game is normally over by now, to be completely honest, in this matchup.
Right. Yeah, if you don't draw a vanish, you are likely dead by turn 6.
Let's bear in mind, we talked about how, bad Saiyan's opening has been. Yeah. He did still freeze a Flame Imp twice and play a Giggling Inventor.
Oh, baby, the prep. That is so absurd. Giving Saiyan full access to quest Giggling this turn. Value trade, and I said Aku is one of the most expressive players you'll watch. That is honestly an undersell for how brutal that turn is against him. That is restraint from Akumaker there. Akumaker playing online would be waving his arms around and screaming right now.
He'd be already plugging in the spare mouse he keeps because he would have thrown the first one. And the problem is he doesn't even see the Scale Hide, the boar that's in hand, which might not look high impact right now, but as 4/4s, just being able to make an immediate impact on a Zoo board is huge. That's not something you should be allowed to do. Normally it's the Zoo player that's making all the direct quick impact plays. That is the face of someone who can't work out how they're supposed to win this game. Because neither can I. That's my face as well, Akumaker. Don't worry. I look exactly the same right now.
Don't listen to us. Just watch Aku. He's telling you everything you need to know right now. This sucks.
And there's no option to even tap into. Okay, tap Fungomancer. Your minions still aren't good enough, to be completely honest, with the power of the Divine Shield on the Annoytrons, so...
Soul Infusion to rebuff the Doomguard, which has been debuffed by being banished from hand after being immediately buffed by Keleseth. If you followed all that.
Still not as many buffs as the last series.
I don't think actually
with like 18 Keleseth.
Never mind. Yeah, dude, that was crazy. Youthful Brew now off the top as well. This Giggling Inventor is now just going to solo this game from this position. It can pick up a value trade, it can return to hand, it can be replayed. 4/4 Divine Shields yet again.
And this goes to show, I think this is a very good example of why a lot of players have been saying Quest Rogue is just the best. because even matchups that do not go your way, at least initially, you have the tools to dig yourself out of even the worst scenarios somehow.
I think Aku just gave the nod of I scoop to that, and yes, he does indeed scoop to that. He doesn't want to play this one out any longer. As I said, the Giggling Inventor just crushed the game, and it was that prep draw, but it was really decided in that mid-game with like the battle for a Giggling Inventor. All four of those tournaments that you mentioned, he made the finals in, so they're all first or second. Crucially, though, you saw in that video package that Justsaiyan has already confirmed that actually my prediction is wrong and he is not going to do well in this tournament because he threw out the dab while he was being filmed. And as we have already established, you cannot dab and win.
I've got a counterpoint.
Okay.
Does the Frostmourne counter that rule? He dabbed with Frostmourne. I mean, come on. Lich King Sword?
Is there established law in Azeroth of dabbing and its effects on win rate?
What if he called it a stab?
What? I'm lost. Hearthstone. So, Malagos Druid up against the Token Druid here. Token Druid generally a little bit more explosive in this matchup, gets its stuff done a little bit quicker, assuming, you know, both players hit the ramp, which on an even basis you are assuming happens because they both play all the same ramp cards. Token Druid's just an explosive kill you kind of strategy happens just a little bit quicker than Malagos most of the time. We do see Saiyan, though, with that mind control tech in hand, mind control tech more and more over this developing meta has become not even really a tech card anymore. It's just if there is a slot in your deck where you can fit a mind control tech, you play it.
Yeah, is my deck not an even deck? Do I put mind control tech in? There's two instant questions there. I will say as well, in this matchup, Spreading Plague, quite a well-known Druid card, doesn't have as much of an impact versus Token Druid as it does versus a lot of other aggressive decks, because Token Druid can take it down and still have the minions alive, still have Soul of the Forest alive, and still save some buffs to actually just win the game as well. Yeah. So, you know, a lot of aggro decks, your opponent plays Spreading Play against you, like, oh, I probably lose. And it's just not the case right now.
Sorry, while you were talking, Aku played Wild Growth on 2 throughout the Well Played. Saiyan countered with a turn 2 Wild Growth and a Well Played. Aku then drew the second Wild Growth, chose not to play it, but Saiyan just decided to match that with a second Wild Growth of his own and did choose, with no better option available, like Aku's Branching Paths, to throw it out. So this non-mirrored decks of the mirrored classes is mirroring in ramp right now.
Yeah, I don't know why it surprises so much. It's just Druid matches, right?
Sure, that's fair. But I do take your point about the Spreading Plague. I think it's a key crux of most Druid mirrors that actually play the card. Token Druid these days not only like does not care about it, you can engineer situations where your opponent's Spreading Plaguing is like a massive debate, right? Like it's what you want them to do, and then you trade off all your wisps and you play your own Spreading Plague. But your 1/5 taunts are a lot better than theirs because you play Stoneshield Scavenger. But it's also easy to fall in the trap if you go like Wisp Soul and your opponent's Spreading Plague.
That's a problem.
That's a problem because you then can't counter Plague with the board state. So there's this wonderful like dance of the Spreading Plagues between the two Druids. That really the player that comes out on top of that exchange is quite often the victorious one in the matchup.
Yeah, and there's always a case as well. It continues to surprise me that more players aren't bringing Token Druid, and you know, a lot of people right now lean Malagos. Loads of people brought Togwaggle at one point, and I feel like Token Druid is just the best deck overall, especially for Druid. But what can the Malagos Druid do better than Token Druid, and why are people bringing it?
It's stronger against Defile decks, first and foremost. You know, decks that play a lot of effective AoE, like Warlock, for example. I think most people would be coming into this tournament expecting Evenlock to be strong because it's, again, you know, the debate between strongest deck in the meta is probably between what? Token Druid, as you said, Quest Rogue, and then Evenlock, right? That's probably the three go-tos. So if you're expecting a lot of Evenlock in the tournament, I think you'd rather be playing Mali Druid a lot of the time. Although there's been a debate that this new list with Stone Shells actually does a ton better against Evenlock even than the old version used to. So yeah, I mean, I'm kind of with you. I think Token Druid is a very, very powerful deck. With very few actual weak matchups.
Just well-rounded,
so
isn't it?
I find that question hard to answer honestly from a personal perspective because I'm actually on your side. I think Token Druid is extremely powerful.
And just in the meantime, we've been discussing this. We just see saying that has got the Twig equipped because there is always, you've played those games against Malygos Druid where they just get you. It's just on 10 you're dead because they've just lined everything up. There's Malygos as well. There's no Dream Petal at the moment, but things are starting to piece together because Saiyan can also dump enough of his hand to go straight into the UI. Because that's something that always interests me as well, is how willing players are to burn X cards or not. And what do they play, what do they throw away, what do they just kind of not even use even a remotely nice way in terms of cards.
What do you need in the matchup? How many cards are you going to draw? How many cards are you going to overdraw versus how many Arcane Tyrants are left in your deck that you might even be able to use to prevent that overdraw? How key is the remaining, Floop or whatever else that you have in your deck when you already have Malygos? Like, these are just all questions that need to be asked.
It's like this, right? Oh, Tyrant could be free next turn, but then you don't have room and burn a card and so on. And I think one of the most common ones I see is like Nourish on 9. Like, just to use it before a UI anyway. Okay, so Akumaker doesn't have any of the cards that actually allow him to go that wide right now, but he has all the cards that benefit from it.
Yeah.
Do you ever right, I'm gonna sell you an idea, Sol. Do you ever just Strong Shell into Soul?
I mean, it's happened once already, right? This Strong Shell came down on a 1/5 on the previous turn.
Double Savage Roar Swipe is not an insignificant amount of damage even with 3 minions.
So Aku knows Saiyan has coin, right? So he's expecting a coin UI play come out on the previous turn. That's backed up by the fact that Saiyan kind of roped and then just played some cards out of his hand, right? So if you were to go Strong Shell Scavenger, you would make, I guess, a juicy enough target for the Ultimate Infestation. Although not really, right?
It's got Soul.
Yeah, but but killing a target and just popping it open into a 2/2, and you back that up with Raw afterwards, I think you're a little bit short of a 2-turn lethal setup, but it is a lot of damage that way. This way does seem significantly weak.
Right, this is what I'm worried about, yeah.
Not just weaker, actually weak to Ultimate Infestation. Yeah. Which worries me.
Because I wouldn't have even minded Arcane Tyrant from Aku there. You'll just get stuff on the board because that's how your deck works. It sounds very dumb and simple, which is what I'm here for. But a lot of the times the simple things are the right ones.
Yeah. Tyrant into Soul would leave the 3/5 taunt on the board still as a perfect target for the UI, but of course it does leave behind the 2/2 afterwards, and you do have double Raw. But yeah, some play that didn't actively lose the board to Ultimate Infestation did seem a little bit more prominent. Aku, though, looking over 2 turns to set up the UI of his own, so he doesn't really mind the 5/5 being on the board because the swing comes back, but how happy are you in a Druid mirror being the player UIing second?
Right. Oh. Naturalized. We can see that, of course, as we mentioned, Double Savage Roar is in hand, and that's one of the more punishing cards to get burnt in this deck. But there is still, for example, Whispering Woods, as we see one go there, or one additional burn next turn as well. And also Branching Paths is normally an additional card that pushes you over the edge in terms of damage, or allows you to close the gap to then double Savage Roar to get the win afterwards.
Justsaiyan now is just going to start pushing. He already has Twig on his final charge. He has Mali in hand. 10 spell damage with Swipe and Moonfire plus the base 5s. That's 15 coming out from those.
I can't get past the feeling that it was just too slow from Aku.
It may have been.
Because Twig was already equipped. You know they've got a huge turn on demand with that, because there's nothing Aku can do to stop the Twig being used.
Are plagued.
And now this is an uphill climb, because there'd have to be what? Swipe, trades with hero power, play something. But then does that matter? Since when your opponents equip Twig and got it to 1 charge, and they've played a UI, you are very, very afraid, considering double Wild Growths are already gone. So the chance of them having dead or bad cards in hand for this big combo gets progressively lower as the game goes on, of course.
Death is eternal. My turn is
Soul the Forest Live, but just doesn't that means it can't do too much about what's actually on board right now.
Yeah, he doesn't really want to, though. It's one of the kind of hidden interactions of the Annoyatrons in this deck is that it often prevents your opponent from trading off their minions and playing Spreading Plague in response, right? Like if you're playing a Druid Mirror, in this situation, because the 1/2s are blockers, you can't trade off your stuff and then re-Spreading Plague. Slightly mitigated by the fact that the minions in play are already the 1/5 taunts that you'd just be making with Spreading Plague anyway, but in different situations, that can be a huge deal.
And now, we have the mini puzzle of Malygos Druid when you get to this point of MC Tech, Malygos, the Dream Pearl, and the Fluke is in hand.
Yeah.
What order do you do
this
things?
again.
Right?
Yeah, this is where my mind went to immediately was MC Tech and just fluke the MC Tech and try and take care of this board state without committing swipe, without trying to do any of that nonsense. And then you're just dominating the board so heavily that you can probably buy yourself 1 or 2 turns that you need to just set up your Dream Pearl win condition, set up your Twig win condition, whatever it is. I don't think you need all the Mali swipe damage or the Mali fluke damage to clutch out this game.
I mean, I guess Spreading Plague wouldn't make much difference. I was wondering whether, like, Swing Twig just drop Mali and be like, I'm that far ahead, friend. It wouldn't have died, would it? Let's be honest, to this board. 3 taunts, 1 with Divine Shield. It's just 4 attacks.
Very unlikely.
Right?
Yeah.
And when your opponent, as Malygos Druid, is taking liberties with plays, is when you know you should be a little bit afraid right now.
Right.
Because what normally happens with Token Druid is you put your opponent in a position from very early in the game that they are scrambling to defend and say, okay, I can't die from this board, okay, I can't die from this board. And that's just not the case. Saiyan's just kind of gone, okay, I'll do this instead. Okay, I'll do this. I'm ahead, it's fine. Or at least even.
Reason to break open the Annoyatron? I guess not, right?
If anything, it gives easier clears the other way.
Yeah.
It?
This now, I imagine, will be Saiyan's clear turn. This
Brian
is
Kibler's favorite card. Druid Spellstone.
Druid Spellstone.
I think we've talked more about Druid Spellstone in the past 3 days than I ever have before.
But this is the swing turn that Saiyan was really waiting for. It's why you didn't see the Twig procced earlier. It's because like this was just way too impressive.
There's there again.
It might actually be lethal with the double buff on branching paths. Now that I look at it, yeah, with Moonfire going through as well, I think it is. Woo, great spot. Aku sees it all coming together as well. Realizes that is 2 matchups going down now with the Moonfire to spare. Hero Power still could have come through for 3 more as well, I believe. No, it couldn't just use the Twig. What am I talking about? And now it's just the Shudderwock Shaman that is remaining. Sorry, there's still the Shudderwock Shaman remaining.
Just staring off, probably trying to just stay calm and refocus and just, you know, look away from the Hearthstone screen for just a second until the next game starts. This is game number 3, and could Saiyan continue this absurd win rate in his current competitive career of he's at 90 before we started this series? It could continue.
He's an overwhelming favorite from this point. Obviously, on the surface, he's 2-0. That makes him an overwhelming favorite. The most difficult deck for Aku to win with is his Shudderwock Shaman, which still remains. That increases Saiyan's edge. This matchup that he's queued into now, Death Rattle Hunter against Zoo, not as bad for the Death Rattle Hunter as many people might think it is on the surface. Again, you know, being a thing that gives Saiyan a little chance. So everything's just queuing up in Saiyan's favor right now, apart from that turn 1 Flame Imp, which is definitely an issue.
Never mind. No, it's not.
I stand corrected. Turn 1 Flame Imps, garbage.
I will say, although the matchup is by no means unwinnable for the Hunter,
Aku, I'm with you. You are justified in your facial expressions right now, sir.
Although the matchup's not, you know, unwinnable for the Hunter, I do feel it is one of the hardest matchups the Hunter has in the current meta. because the minions are always like, there are not often you can play flanking strike on turn 4 and feel good about it.
I think
because there's still more minions ahead.
I was almost about to counter with the exact opposite statement. I think there are quite a lot of times where you flanking strike on turn 4 and feel very happy about it. I think that buys you a lot of time sometimes. Houndmaster Shaw equally is just a minion that they very rarely have a bunch of value trades on board for.
Don't get me talking about Houndmaster Shaw
Right.
solo
on turn 4, so suddenly they just have to like suicide 2 or 3 minions into your Houndmaster Shaw, then suddenly you're in like Witchwood Grizzly territory. You're just a deck that can just put a bunch of really annoying roadblocks in the way of the Zoo deck. I do think Zoo is favored by a small percentage, but a small percentage.
We should play some games then.
Okay.
Because all I see right now is, imagine a Flame Imp on this board and more damage.
There was a Flame Imp.
If you're telling me, yeah, Hunter's advantage when they play Keleseth on 2, or on 1 even.
That's a realistic percentage of the games when you draw Keleseth. Those all count. Okay. You don't just ignore them.
Okay.
Can this go on?
Still very wide board, and Terrascale doing its part-time job of just being a 3/3.
Yeah.
It's, maybe his night job or something, and he's going to be able to trade pretty well versus these chain gangs. It is one thing that helps in this matchup is a lot of the minions can 2-for-1 chain gang, flanking strike being one of them that we mentioned earlier.
Yep.
I wonder.
Justsaiyan thinking long and hard here. I believe his Houndmaster Shaw is a 4/7 here, right? Yeah, to get off the tracking after the Keleseth, so I struggle to find a justification for a different play.
You'd have to tell me something crazy right now, because Houndmaster Shaw will just soak more damage, and if it doesn't, sweet.
Yes. The downside, I guess, of his Shaw somewhat is a Fungalmancer play from Aku, which on the 2/3 does at least give him some form of value trading, but it's still not a great Fungalmancer against a 4/7, is it?
It's not. And the decision has been made now. Does Akumaker have to kill it? I think naturally all the time, yes. But or can he ignore it? He does have double Fungalmancer. Maybe it can just steamroll the board fast enough and go wide enough, most importantly.
That's fair.
I will say as well, just in case you guys don't know, which you probably don't know why you would, is the Spellbreaker, there's no silence in Akumaker's Zoo. Some people text Spellbreaker in, but there's 1 Dreadlord, 2 Doom Guards. So, kind of taking those slots. So there's no way, say, Akumaker can just forget about a cube, Spellbreaker the Houndmaster, do things like that. Spellbreaker a Grizzly, for example. Grizzly, well, with your opponent with 4 cards in hand is fine. Still a nice total health. Soulfire being picked up also really helps, though. Suddenly, Dreadlord into Soulfire looks okay.
You want Dreadlord here? If you're going with the Soulfire option. Is it even a significant improvement over the Fungalmancer play?
I guess the question is, are you going to get... That's a good question. Are you going to get more value from Fungalmancer later? Probably not.
Mushroom power!
I feel like Fungalmancer is just such a generally oppressive play that it's not really subject to like that kind of conventional wisdom, which many cards are. Like, oh, can I use this for better value later? It's just like, can I use it now? Yes. All right, sweet. I'm going to Fungalmancer you.
Very quickly as well, funnily enough, Solarium feels like the best discard there.
Yeah, very
Overall,
possibly.
It's
very possibly.
Solarium often is the card you want Soulfire to discard, which feels strange since it's a legendary spell that you choose to put in your deck. But yeah, I actually think it's the best. Fungal Enchanter, depending on this turn from Saiyan, going to get some good value next turn. And then Dreadlord's just a good, beefy minion to drop down and not really get dealt with by Hunter in any good way.
Saiyan is now just starting to run out of steam just a little bit. He's picked up a few of the greedier anti-control cards at this point. And if Aku continues to nicely weave around mind control tech as he has been doing for the majority of this game, Justsaiyan might just be out of defensive options unless he can find a Rexar.
And the funny thing is as well, Justsaiyan could be like, I'm not going to kill any of your minions, so your next minion plays into mind control. Whoa, okay.
So Aku does look like he's extending here, but the damage is just stacking up. If you're going to play around mind control tech the other way, I would have perhaps liked to have seen a value trade there, just so you have 5 minions in play instead of 4, which mitigates the effect of just your swingiest minion being stolen.
I also just think with Doomguard, why wouldn't you? You have very aggressive cards in hand, push as much damage as possible, because Hunter doesn't have great defensive tools, especially when one Grizzly is already gone.
Right.
Like, what are they doing that stops you hitting face next turn?
Right.
Not a lot. And that is going to be Akumaker putting a win on the board. He's not going to be 3-0'd by Saiyan, so probably, as you can see now, a sigh of relief and saying, yes, we are friends. I still don't want you to 3-0 me in an absolutely hugely important tournament.
Yeah, why would you? And Zoo does get over the line there, even against the Kaliseth from
The Druid and Saiyan, of course, on his Hunter once again. This is also a hard matchup for Hunter.
No Kaliseth in sight this time for Saiyan, and there is a growth for Akumaker. And yeah, it's not the kind of deck that Hunter is particularly resilient against. Again, it's where that, quote, tech card, mind control tech, comes into the metagame so strongly right now, which, again, I made the point earlier that it isn't really a tech card these days. It's just kind of core to the meta. It just has a huge impact against so many different decks, because the decks that just aren't naturally going massively wide quite often have Giggling Inventor in them, which ends up playing 4 minions on the board, so it's very rarely a dead card.
Yeah, we see the full throw there from Saiyan, so choosing not to keep Candle Shot, choosing not to keep Mind Control Tech, because there is one thing I do like to do in this matchup as the Token Druid is, as I do in quite a lot of matchups now I think about it, is just play Whispering Woods on 4 mana, you know, depending on
completely agree.
but you just play it and you're like, well, what is Hunter going to do against 4 minions?
Yes.
Maybe they kill 1? Okay, no problem, move on.
Yeah, Candle Shot on 1 against almost every other aggro deck is fantastic. Against Token Druid, doesn't matter that much because the 1/1s that you have to kill don't happen on turn 1, right?
Yes,
so you don't
exactly.
you don't need it in your opening hand. So as the Hunter, your game plan is more aggressive egg and just get going, which Saiyan has found perfectly with his mulligan. Or it's Deathstalker Rexar, which is a tool that lines up much better against the kind of turn where Druid is going to explode onto the board against you. But yes, Aku, yes, he has the nuts again. Don't worry about it. It's true. He has it. You better believe.
And I think as well, so watching Aku and his, very, visual reactions to things, this is actually what goes through every player's mind. It's just not all of them show it.
Right.
On their facial expression. Akumaker isn't a super unique character in, there's only him who gets upset by things. He reveals it a little bit more, I think.
He did mention in our interview, and it didn't really come as any great surprise to us, but maybe surprising that he kind of openly talked about it, that he perhaps does tilt more easily than most players, but how in the last year or so he felt like he's got a handle on that better. And just because he's emotionally reacting to things doesn't mean that he's playing badly because of it, which is what tilt is, right? Like tilt is not just being angry. You can be angry and have that focus you and make you play better. And that's kind of what Aku was talking about. Similar to probably the best player in the UK right now, Ball Control, when he's on camera being in high profile.
Looks like it's emotional wreck.
Yeah, he again quite often wears his heart on his sleeve and displays his emotion, but it doesn't seem to affect his play because Ball Control's having a fantastic year this year.
Yeah, and Akumaker I think spoke specifically about working on recovering from problems like that, as opposed to just not feeling it, which is pretty much impossible unless you are a robot, as far as I'm aware.
Yeah, and of course I was, being a little bit facetious about Saiyan having drawn very well this series, which he has, but part of the reason why good players seem to draw better than bad players is that they know how to mulligan, right? Like Saiyan did not keep cards that many players would in this matchup, and he's been rewarded for it with a much, much better hand than had he kept things like Candle Shot.
I've said it once, I've said it again, I actually think the mulligan is actually the hardest part of the game.
Very possibly, yeah.
It's really hard to understand and know exactly what to keep in multiple different scenarios. But already now 2 5/5s on the board for Saiyan as he starts marching his dinosaurs all the way to Akumaker's face, and most importantly, he has the Katharina Winterwisp to follow up with in a little bit late game, which might just be the card that pushes him over the edge, because Saiyan is actually playing 1 Devil Saw, which means that there is an additional, it's not just, King Crush to win and out. There's actually a 7/7 with that has charge to a certain extent. Could be pulled out from Katharina, and that is also just going to be a huge problem for Akumaker to deal with if he isn't in control.
Yeah, and with 1 Grizzly already in Saiyan's hand, the chance that he gets a big chargey boy off his Katharina is actually increased So this game could be ending sooner rather than later, if it even really gets to that point, because there's just a couple of 5-5s beating down and no real end in sight just yet with the pressure, with flanking strike coming behind all that as well.
Yeah, one of the frustrations, if you look at Akumaker's hand now, Spreading Plague, 2 of them just died.
Yeah.
Giggling Inventor, your opponent runs Mossy Horror, but there is a turn gap, which I think is why the Giggling Inventor wins out on this turn.
Yeah,
you are not going to get Mossy Horror next turn, so you have time and space to get something done.
Even then, Giggling Inventor into a Candle Shot being equipped is not really the dream for you, just because it so effectively deals with one of those Divine Shields immediately. Against Death Rattle Hunter, Divine Shields can do massive amounts of work because they don't really have small sources of damage to allocate to them outside of that Candle Shot. But I agree, I think the most important thing for Aku to weigh there was that it came down that turn before the Mossy Horror was available.
Yep. There's a second, kind of a second Giggling Inventor as well in hand, so Akumaker can do it again if he really wants to, but I think he's just looking for some kind of buff, some kind of way to deal with these minions in...
I'm pretty good at translating Aku's gestures. Not sure what that one is. Some kind of board combat that he's working out right now. That's all I've got.
How's he trying to remember the cards of what his next opponent will be?
Okay.
Right, so what's the guy on the other side of the bracket going to play? Double Swipe does kill the 2/5/4s and makes the Grizzly a 3/5. Doesn't get cleaned up by anything else, although the Spellstone will help as well.
So actually, if I had to guess, I'd say he's weighing up, like if he plays Plague or if he plays Giggling Inventor, what do his opponent's minions look like on the following turn? Does his Swipe and Spellstone get better, right? If he spends another turn softening the board up with a Giggling Inventor or a Spreading Plague, he comes to the conclusion, no, my clear right now is just good enough, and I'm going to take it.
I'd have to agree as well. That's about as good as it's going to get, considering how behind he was. He's still not in a great spot. Say now can just play Hamster Shaw. He's chosen not to. Shooting a flanking strike and getting a 3/3. Does surprise me a little bit, considering how top-heavy his hand is right now.
It does. I think it, in theory, advances his board position more over the course of 2 turns. Like net against a Token Druid's board, which is very important. Like if he left 1 minion alive there, that's 1 extra minion that can be buffed and death rattled and so on the following turn. Whereas now he goes into the next turn with like 1 extra minion in play, and maybe his Shore comes down where he has more options to follow up.
Because I thought about it the other way,
okay,
where you play Shaw is extremely unlikely to die to an Annoyatron, and then you just flank and strike and charge with the 3/3 to make the trade, which kind of catches you up on any deficiency you'll have.
I can see that
from playing it that way. Because now, what draws are going to happen this turn that make Shaw better?
I mean, honestly, I'm with you. My instinct was Shaw that turn as well, just kind of trying to perhaps explain where Saiyan's head was at. But yeah, it looked like a perfectly good Howlmaster Shaw turn to me. Because the exact opposite, as you said, of the point I present is that you give your opponent so much more freedom by not playing Houndmaster Shaw. They don't have to have any kind of reactive turn. They can just jam onto the board and do whatever they want. And that's exactly what Aku's ended up doing.
This is scary as well. Somehow, Aku, running on fumes in terms of hand size, is having just enough to present a problem. Suddenly, 3 3/4s, 2 of which have Taunt Divine Shield, and a 2/3 is more than a wolf. And it's a little bit scary because this turn is a whiff. And again, one of my issues was, well, what 3-mana card can you draw next turn that fits with Shaw? Like, Terror Scale?
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
One Terror Scale left in the deck,
What, another turn with no Shaw?
Gonna Hunter's Mark it in this order because it just kind of feels better than Hunter's Marking and then trading a 3/3 into a 3/1. Little things.
Feels cleaner. There are some power plays coming next turn for Saiyan though, and you might look at, oh well, Spreading Plague's there if he goes wide, right? But you make it 1/5s versus 6/6, 8/8s, and so on. So not really too scary. Katharina into King Crush does give him some pushing power, and Akumaker only at 22 right now. This Wild Growth draw could be heavily impactful on how the turn looks for Saiyan.
Yeah, choosing to growth because the branching path just ends up being a lot more flexible. The Whispering Woods now gives him kind of information that perhaps he wants to keep drawing with the branching paths to keep his hand size up. But if he'd have found like a more aggressive, just vanilla play off the wild growth, then he could potentially just be using Soul of the Forest, branching paths as a plus attack option to just try and end this game as quickly as possible and force damage through.
Time waits for no one.
I think I like the Whispering Woods here. Because I think I would have guessed that Saiyan would not have Rexar based on previous turn.
I'd say that is a reasonable read, but not a hard one at this point.
Oh, yeah, yes. Well, I said I would just guess,
Yeah,
right?
no.
And I think, again, just if that's the only card you get rough to, of course, Mossy Horror is a little bit annoying, but Mossy Horror on this turn isn't that scary because they're just Mossy Horror hero power. And you're like, well, okay, you have 2/7.
Right.
Enjoy. I do like going wide, especially with double Solar Forest. Can dramatically increase the power of Akumaker's board if he can get it live and trade those minions off.
Now is it Katharina or is it Shaw into Terrascale's daughter? And immediately you realise you don't ask that question. Katharina was green, so you play her.
I think I would have done the Shaw play. You get to kill the 3/4. You can die this turn. That's what scares me the most against Druid. Or against Token.
I mean, you could die against the 4 minions anyway. I don't think it makes a huge difference, does it? 3, 6, 7, 8, 9, 19. You do die to just 1 Savage Roll this way, actually.
That's exactly what I was talking about.
Yeah, you definitely counted that, right? Yeah.
And now becomes the tricky part of these minions are not going anywhere for Akumaker, so Saiyan has to consider, do I just die this turn, next turn, the turn after? It doesn't go anywhere now, they can't be cleared, so Saiyan has to piece together a plan that wins him the game, and I think this could get very, very difficult right now.
2 damage going into the Double Soul, so the Wisps are going to trade off here just to prevent any maddening cube shenanigans on the follow-up, which makes sense. It's worth noting that, you know, the Katharina didn't just summon a charge minion there. There's still an Ironwood Grizzly that it could have pulled on the previous turn from Saiyan as well, which, you know, changes the matter enormously on what kills you on the following turn. And gets a very awkward minion in play for Aku to have to deal with.
That second soul is huge. They could have been tracking into Rexar this turn, which would have helped. But there's the Witchwood Grizzly coming down now. It's a huge health minion to get through. And I think you get played dead this turn because you want to try and draw a cube if... Oh, the Grizzly dies though, right?
Feels like an MCT to me. He does go with the Playdead though.
That's another
I forgot he had the egg on board. Sorry, the board being covered. Yeah. Playdead makes much more sense. I totally forgot that 0/1 Devil Soul Edge was still in play. That's my bad.
It's okay, Soul. Don't worry. We're all human. Look at this, in a certain kind of setup where you could say, I'll kill 2. Was that just a mistake?
Why?
Well, you could have attacked face with Katharina? What health minion did he just kill with the Katharina?
A 2/2.
Why didn't you kill it with the 3/12 and go face with Katharina for 6? Didn't attack with the Grizzly. Because if he pops any of these, it's just a 2/2 again.
Right.
So he just
But
missed
then he'd
6
have
damage.
he'd have a 10 health Grizzly on board against 8 damage from these, as opposed to a 12 health Grizzly on board against 8 damage from these. It's not strictly wrong.
He also has King Crush in hand.
I mean, yes.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, okay. Gonna have saying about that later on.
Okay.
The time in which I ask him will depend greatly on the outcome of this match as well. So Saiyan has nothing left in the beast pool, right? For Katharina? That is just a 6/4 now.
Time waits for
Yeah,
no
looking at it, I think this is perfectly reasonable, right? Because you have 9, 14, 17, 20 damage on board, plus a King Crush in hand, right? So if your opponent can't get through your 3/12, the attack on the previous turn from Katharina doesn't really achieve anything. So just like maximizing the chance that that Grizzly survives may have been right.
Justsaiyan may as well track. It's not going to get any worse from if he does.
Bossy
and that looks
horror.
like a bossy boy.
Is going to allow him to plow through.
Ooh. Showing nods. Also, let's bear in mind that is tracking number 2 in 2 turns where Saiyan had no cards.
Yep.
Huge, and that was a shake of the head from Akumaker. And one of those, that 5/5 there, you can see with the extra special glow, only has rush, so it cannot go face.
Yep.
Same with the mossy horror, but the rest of it, it can, but it probably won't now.
Which, by my count, makes it the 22 I counted last turn, meaning that he's one off this turn. Again, the 5/5, the Devil Saw on the left, and the Mossy Horror could not have attacked face that turn.
And we are now getting to the point similar to what you mentioned with the Malagos game is, you know, whether or not this is lethal, it's lethal to a large extent. I do not know a card that Akumaker can draw that wins in this game.
Ultimate Infestation is a hell of a card, Raven, but it's not this good. It's just not this good.
I was afraid and wondering where you were going with that, but well played. Akumaker looks like he's ready to concede. Just a quick stall on the count to make sure Giggling Inventor, which is also a hell of a card, does not get the job done. But we can see, of course, there is just 8 damage from hand available for Saiyan, and it looks like Saiyan may not be able to keep this insane streak going.
Yeah, from Aku's perspective, I believe it does keep him alive on board, but the King Crush coming through as an additional attack to connect with face is going to be the game ender.
Great way to finish any Hunter game is with a King Crush. A smile and nod from Aku. He knows he has lost the series. Saiyan starts this champs off the right way, and to be honest, not the most unexpected way. Everyone has counted on Saiyan to get the job done. Is people's pretty much favorite to win the whole tournament, to be completely honest.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if he was leading the march in terms of choose your champions for the people at home looking for packs. He's definitely leading the charge in terms of caster predictions here with 3 people picking him, including myself.